Welcome to Wisdom Woman podcast. I believe that is in constant change and growth, not in perfection, that we find happiness. In this podcast, I'm going to be talking with top performance professionals about tools, techniques, new ideas on how to develop your communication skills, use your creative thinking, be a team player, manage your tasks like a pro, be motivated, become an expert on relationships, and a problem solver. Everything you need to be 5 stars in all areas of your life. My intention is to help you develop your skills and find balance between your professional and personal life. My name is Bettina Meyer-Flug, and I hope I can be your trusted advisor. Today, we're going to learn how to develop an unshakable confidence. My friend Andy will share some tips, stories, and strategies to better deal with your confidence. This episode will help you unleash your inner strength and build an unshakable confidence you need to succeed in life. We'll explore the topic of confidence from all angles and share practical insights. Andy is an experienced coach I met in Colorado when I was living in the United States. And I admire him because he's one of the board members of ICF Colorado, is the coaching association. And he spent a couple of decades in senior corporate leadership before transitioning to coaching. So that means he has a lot of experience in the corporate environment. And he's also a professional certified coach, an executive strength coach, an brain-based coach. He has several credentials. He specialized in working with organizational leaders, helping them be more authentic and inspired in their leadership role. Whatever you're struggling with, self-doubt, fear of failure, or simply want to boost your self-esteem, this episode is for you. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take your self-confidence to the next level. Thanks, Andy, so much for taking the time and sharing your knowledge here with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful for you to ask me to be here.
So, Andy, why don't you think we take some time to introduce yourself properly? I said several things about you, but we would love to learn what kind of clients you're passionate about helping and how do you help them as a coach?
Thank you for that. I work primarily with organizational leaders, as you said, especially folks who have a desire to really grow and expand their awareness of how they're showing up in the world, and in service to the people around them, in service to the organization. Obviously, we all benefit from learning a little bit more about ourselves and showing up in a fully self-expressed way. And the folks I work with are especially attuned to do that in order to be in service to the world.
That's awesome. So at our conversation, you mentioned also about startups. And I think we have a lot of new females starting their own business. And you said you make a huge impact on startup leaders. How do you do that? Why do you think your support is so important for startup leaders?
Yeah, I think that's a important call out. I do work with a lot of folks in the startup world, a lot of very fast growing organizations going through a lot of change. And I think what happens in those moments is we bring a lot of leadership in that has expertise attached to it. It might be a very high level programmer. It might be someone who's especially terrific engineer. However, they haven't been really exposed to how to scale an organization, how to lead folks through change. And especially as the organization grows, it typically moves from a very generalized, everybody wears a lot of hats, to more of a specialized organization. And it's really helpful for people to be able to step into a very authentic way of leading, so that they don't feel like they have to have all the answers. They don't have to feel like they have to be an expert in every area, but rather they know how to identify people who complement their strengths and people who can add value to the organization. And those are the folks that I think get a lot of value out of coaching specific in general, and in working with me specifically.
That's great. So, depending on the age, they all need to learn more about confidence, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's pretty common.
So, you think this topic of self confidence appear in a lot of your sessions? Everybody really struggle with that?
It is very common. I would guess it shows up in maybe 50 or 60% of the engagements that I work in. And if depending on which research um, forum you look through, maybe upwards to 85% of people, adults in general, suffer at some point in their lives from lack of confidence or low self-esteem or a sense of imposter syndrome or the inner critic showing up, something like that. But it's very common. And if you're feeling less than confident, don't feel like you're alone, because there's likely somebody sitting right next to you who also suffers from the same problem. I suffer from the problem sometimes.
Yeah, I think the main reasons people suffer from lack of confidence is excessive expectation and perfectionism, don't you think?
I think that's really important, that either expectations that were set for them early in life or expectations that they've taken on for themselves that they're finding it's difficult to meet all the time. I think that's a huge driver of this problem.
Yes, even more than the lack of experience or lack of skills, it's more like what people will think about me, isn't it?
I think I think I think I think you called out something that is so common, that we get into a place of self-judgment, of measuring ourselves against an unrealistic comparison, and and showing up in a way that doesn't feel like we're meeting the goals that we set for ourselves. And so it does, oftentimes this is driven internally. It comes from a place inside, that we're in which we're making up stories about where we should be. The word "should" underlined, where we should be in our lives or in our work.
And not accepting things as they are, like trying to aim too high, isn't it?
Right. And I think and we'll get into this, I think, later when we talk about kind of overcoming this issue. But that, I think, it comes back to self-acceptance. Do we feel good about ourselves? Do we feel good in our own skins?
Yeah, for sure. So it's normal to have this lack of confidence.
Yeah, I think it's very common, and it's also situational. There may be most of our lives where we feel very confident, very cool, very calm, very settled, very grounded. And then there are certain aspects in our lives where, gosh, we can just feel um, our gut kind of crawl. We can feel some tension in our shoulders. Maybe we start to sweat, breathe fast, or our heart starts to race. It doesn't have to be across all aspects of our lives. There can be certain aspects in which it shows up, and it can still be very debilitating. And more importantly, you can suffer with it. And 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 it and I think the outcome of that is that maybe we don't show up as powerfully and as authentically as we want to.
Mhm. And why do we want to work on our confidence? What are the impacts on working on our confidence?
I think the I think there are a couple of things when we talk about the impact of low confidence or low self-esteem. First of all, it's, as everybody can identify with, I think, it's very uncomfortable. It's not a place we like to put ourselves. And it has some physical manifestations like heart racing, fast breathing, things like that. Um, and so it's not the way, it's just very uncomfortable, and it can create a lot of anxiety when we look forward to these situations that we know we don't feel strong in. So there's that personal aspect of really suffering through it. If we look at it from a greater aspect, from a higher level, when we show up, if we think about a lack of confidence leading to a place of anxiety or a place of fear, we don't make our best decisions from a place of fear, as I think everybody might recognize. When we're in a place of fear, we tend to make decisions based on kind of a kind of a freeze, fight, or flight kind of dimension. So we limit our options. We limit our perspectives. We're not as resourceful as we'd like to be. On the other hand, when we're in a place of confidence, when we're feeling very comfortable with ourselves, we tend to see many more options, many more alternatives for the decisions we make. And from that place, we can just be far more resourceful. And can you imagine, Bettina, a world in which we're all making decisions from a place of self-confidence, from a place of grounding, from a place of calm? Can you imagine how decisions would be made in this world if we all felt that way all the time?
Well, of course. And you mentioned something super important, feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And in my point of view, the confidence, to gain self-confidence, you need to manage better your feelings, because the feelings will always be there, like being afraid of not being enough, being afraid of not having the skills needed, being afraid of everything. And
Mm-hmm.
some people don't face their feeling, they don't overcome the feeling, they just freeze and not act towards things. And I'm going to give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I was challenged by my marketing team to start doing TikTok videos, because TikTok, it's easy to do ads and everything, but I wasn't feeling ready to do the videos. I had like a lack of confidence. Said, I'm not able to do those videos. My kids are gonna laugh at me. What? It was so hard. But I decided to face my fears and practice and do it, like managing the feelings that I was having, but practicing to be good at it. I don't feel comfortable yet, but I was able to record around 10 videos already, and
Wow.
my team is pushing up those videos on ads, and it's bringing results. It's not perfect, but it's bringing results, and I'm gaining confidence as I go. So I think the secret for me was just to face the feelings that I was feeling around it,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to manage them and doing anyway, not feeling ready, not feeling skilled, not feeling prepared.
Mm-hmm.
But by putting my face out there, I kind of gained the confidence I needed. Now I'm the phase of recording the next 5 round of videos. I'm feeling much better now. But
Wow.
was like managing the feelings was the hard part of it.
Right. Right. I love that story. First of all, congratulations. That sounds awesome. And just the presence you bring to these kind of things, I imagine these videos are going to be very powerful. And I love the story because I think it calls out a couple of really important things. One, when we were talking about your fears, you talked about, what are my kids going to think? What's the rest of the world going to think? Do you notice where you're putting your focus?
Uh-huh.
On how others are going to view you. And a challenge with that, Bettina, is that we have no control how others view us. And so that lack of control can really contribute to our sense of anxiety, that fear that you mentioned. And the other thing that I think you called out, which was terrifically important, is that you didn't try to tell yourself, oh, I'm not scared here. This is comfortable. You didn't try to deny the feelings. Instead, you called them up and you acknowledged them and said, I can be with this. And I can be with this, and I'm choosing to go forward anyway. And that is so important, to acknowledge what you're feeling in these moments. And that's something we're going to be talking about when we get into how to deal with this. That's one of the steps in creating that unshakable confidence you talked about.
Thank you. Yes, it was a good input that you added on. Yes, I was afraid of what they're going to think, but now they're kind of liking. I share with them, what do you think? Now they share videos with me. Mom, you should do one like this. Mom, try this.
What a turnaround.
Yes,
Wow.
they're
That's
enjoying.
amazing. That's awesome.
So what kind of tips do you have for us to better manage our feelings when we have this lack of confidence?
Well, I think that's a great segue into ways to deal with this. And I think you called out something terrifically important. And I'm going to call out 6 or 7 steps that you can reach out for in overcoming this anxiety, overcoming this discomfort, overcoming this sense of I don't belong here or I'm not enough here. And step one is exactly what you referenced. Instead of trying to push the feeling down, I really suggest that you acknowledge it. Hey, I'm not feeling good here. This doesn't feel comfortable. This isn't my sweet spot right now. I'm feeling discomfort right now. Acknowledge it, because as I'm sure you're aware, Bettina, and I think many folks know, these feelings of imposter, these feelings of I'm not enough, they're most powerful when they reside in your unconscious, when you're not facing them straight on. They have all their power when they're ruling you from behind. So first of all, call them out. Say, hey, I see you there, discomfort. I see you there, anxiety. I see you there, self-esteem. So first of all, call it out. Second, have some self-compassion around this. This is very common. Everybody faces this at some point in their lives, just about. And I think if you talk to 10 people, you're going to get 9.5 people who tell you, yes, I face this sometimes in certain parts of my life, at least. So first of all, have some self-compassion. Say, hey, I'm okay. I'm okay here. Third, lean into your strengths. And what I mean by a strength is it's something that makes you uniquely brilliant. Remember who you are and what you've already overcome in your life. Call up a situation where in the past when you felt really uncomfortable and think about those things about your makeup, your demeanor, your character that allowed you to overcome those things. And that allows you to get to a place of, I'm approaching this from a place of strength and resourcefulness rather than a place of fear. So lean into your strengths. Another tool you can step into here is what I call choose your story. So when you went into these TikTok videos, you were holding a story that said, wow, I have no experience here. Wow, I'm uncomfortable in front of the camera. Wow, I'm going to have a lot of ums and filler words and uhs, and I'm probably not going to be smooth. That's one story. Another story is, gosh, I have something to bring here. I have something that people are going to want to hear. And think about where that first story took you, to a place of fear and anxiety and I'm not enough. Where the second story might take you is, gosh, I have some power here. I have some agency here. I have something that I can bring to the world. And imagine how empowering that story might be for you. Another tip for you might be practice setting boundaries. Practice saying no when it's not in service to you, or if it's not in service to the world you want to create. Oftentimes we're asked to do things because people know that we will show up, because people know we might be competent at something. And in fact, it actually creates strength in you when you find out where your boundaries lie and where you want to show up. So practice saying no. And you can use a positive no, like, hey, you know what? That request you're making, I think is really important. I'm probably not the best person for you, but let me recommend a couple of people that might be able to do the same thing for you, that are far better at it than I am. So it's okay to say no, because in cases where it's not in service to you, or it's not in service to the work you're trying to create in the world. And my last kind of tip here, Bettina, is if this is truly debilitating for you, if it shows up in a way that is really holding you back in a very consistent way, or in ways that are really crossing over many parts of your life, see a pro. Find a professional therapist or coach who can help you identify what the stories you're holding are, maybe where they're coming from, and it can help support you in moving forward. There's no reason to suffer alone in this. Lean into a friend, lean into a professional, lean into a mentor. Many of the stories we tell ourselves when we feel this way is maybe a tiny bit of shame, maybe a tiny bit of I'm the only one who's feeling this way. By sharing what you're going through with somebody else, suddenly you can normalize it, and it's not nearly as powerful over you.
I totally
How does
agree. I
all that?
love this one that you said. Something I love, it's not just hiring someone to help, but being around people you admire that are good on this topic.
Yes. Oh
I
my
can
gosh.
give you an example. I have some coaches that I admire that have been in TED Talks. And this is one of the things that I want to do. I said, okay, let me surround my people who did it already and just feel what are the skills they developed to be able to be there. And just by seeing them talking, getting ready for events, participating whenever they go talk, this helps put my self-confidence up because I can see that I have some of the skills they already have. And whatever I don't have, I can ask them to teach me.
Right.
And have an accountable partner, could be a coach, could be someone that already managed the skill very well, could help you a lot. I love this tip. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, for sure. One of the things I offer up to people sometimes is surround yourself with people that you really admire, people that lift you up. Oftentimes through family relationships or through work situations, we end up around people perhaps that we didn't choose, that maybe aren't as inspiring for us, maybe don't see how magical we really are. And what if we instead chose to surround ourselves, at least in part of our lives, with people who have a habit of lifting us up, who see us for all of our strengths, from that lens of, wow, what does this person bring instead of what does this person lack? And that can be a tremendously enlivening experience.
I totally agree. I always tell my coaching clients, like, who are you going to include in your army? If you aim to create an army around you to feel stronger and attack everything you want, who's going to be part of this army? People who put you down or people who really bring you your energy up?
I love that analogy. Yeah, create your own army.
When we were preparing this podcast, you mentioned something about being connected to the energy source. Can you share this? I think this is so valuable for everybody.
Well, I hope I can recall exactly what we were talking about here. But one of the things that really helps me, and I think helps a lot of people, is checking in with yourself on in a couple of different ways. Check in not just with where we typically go with our heads, that analytical part of us, but also check in with other parts of us. For instance, our bodies, our physiological self really has a lot of messages for us. And if you stop for a second and just ask your body, hey, what do you have to teach me about this situation? You might see things percolate up that you hadn't thought about yet. Then check in with that emotional part of yourself, that part that has the feelings, that expresses yourself from an emotional place. If I ask that emotional feelings place in me, what does that have to teach me right now? You might see some things show up. And finally, ask that spirit part of you, that source part of you, that you might call it your soul, and ask that part of you, the place that gives you kind of a sense of consciousness. Ask that part of you, whatever you call it, ask it, what do you have to share with me right now? And keep note of these things. And what you might see is there's a pattern here, and there might be some things that perhaps you hadn't seen just by checking in with that analytical, reasoning, logical part of yourself.
I love what you said. And I really rely on meditation for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm meditating every day. I'm kind of developing a way to check on me, how am I feeling? And going back to this example of the TikTok videos, I noticed that when I was sitting, I was feeling like constricted, I was feeling limited. And I had like a microphone attached to my clothes, attached to the phone. All those things made me feel stuck in a place, not able to express myself, but was like a small physical limitation that I was putting in this environment that was not necessary. So I changed the setup. I put a standing up table. I removed the microphone. Then I felt free to record the videos. I could like move my hands, say whatever I wanted. So small things, if I haven't perceived how the small changes was impacting my actions and keep doing this way, like constricted all the time, I wouldn't get better. So checking in yourself with your energy, how everything around is impacting you. Right. That's a big thing too.
I think it brings up a couple of things for me. One, exactly what you described. I was a little bit nervous getting ready for our call today, and I spent the last couple of minutes before we came on screen just breathing, just telling myself, I'm okay here. I'm safe. The other thing a resource I would offer up to you is that Amy Cuddy, an educator at Stanford, does this wonderful work around power poses. And you know, Bettina, how when we're feeling really good in the world, we tend to stand up straighter. Our shoulders tend to go back. And what's happening is that inner sense of confidence is feeding our physiological self. Well, it turns out it works the other way many times. If we're feeling a little down, maybe not so strong in the moment, by sitting up straight, by throwing our chest out, by throwing our chins out, by throwing our shoulders back, and speaking in a strong voice, oftentimes that feeds our sense of confidence. And so oftentimes it works in reverse. And we can, just as you described, you change your physiological state and felt better about it. That's really true. That really can help us oftentimes.
I will try and take a look on that too.
Amy Cuddy, Cuddy.
We will put on the description of the podcast as well, so anyone can take a look on this. So the majority of our audience are females. Do you think females face the confidence gap differently than males, mainly in the work environment, or is the same? What is your opinion?
Well, I'm hesitant to make generalizations because every individual and certainly every woman has her own experience. But a couple of things I notice in working with a lot of women executives is that oftentimes they bring a sense of perfection to their work, a need to really be perfect in how they're showing up. I think that can hold people back. I think oftentimes because they're in situations where the majority of the room is male, they may feel a little bit alone and feeling like maybe they don't quite belong. Oftentimes women and men are socialized differently. And this is one of those places where I hate to stereotype, but men are coached when they're brought up to be strong and to use their voice. And women sometimes are taught to be quiet and to step back. And all of those things can contribute to not feeling safe and confident in using your voice. And I think one antidote to that is check the evidence, is what I call this. What's really true about the situation? Do I belong? Do I have the credentials? Do I have a point of view? Do I have experience? Do I have expertise? By checking that evidence, it can help us feel more grounded and more in a place where we're ready to speak up at the same volume with the same sense of expression as the people around us.
Thank you. I think this was very valuable. We're seeing a lot of females being promoted and stepping into new roles. Why it's so challenging for them being compared to males?
Well, first of all, males have a lot of models. They've been raised in a world where most of the leaders were male, so it was easy for them to see themselves in the next role. That hasn't been true for females, unfortunately. Second, and I know this was true for me, we tend to bring a perspective that I need to show up in a certain way in my work, in my profession, right? And I need to be somebody different at the office than I do at home. When in fact, when we show up authentically as ourselves, we tend to show up more powerfully, tend to draw people to us. We tend to show up more self-expressed, and women may not feel as comfortable being fully themselves in that next leadership role because it may not be the same lessons they've learned in watching their male leaders. It may be a different way of leading, and that may feel strange because people haven't seen that yet. And it's unfortunate because all the research, and I think people's experience is that when people are exposed to different perspectives, that gives them license to really use their voice and to feel confident bringing their full selves to their work.
Yeah, makes sense, of course. And also, making decisions is something that we have to do every day in our work environment,
Sure.
at home. Is there any secret on how to make good decisions?
Well, I think it goes back to what you and I were talking about a few minutes ago. I think it comes down to come at it from a place of full resourcefulness, from full confidence. And what that means is putting yourself in a good place to make decisions. Make some, have some thoughts around, am I making this decision from a place of running towards something or running away from something? Am I making this decision to enliven my life, to bring a more fuller life, or am I making it to get away from something? Am I making it from a place of lots of options, a sense of real choice, or a place because I have to make a call? And am I making it from a place of what I want for myself and what I want for the people around me? Or am I making it from a place of I'm doing this for someone else? I think those are some questions to ask yourself as you're approaching a decision.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And what do you think pull us back from living our biggest life?
So what keeps us from living our biggest life? Oftentimes, the things that bring up the greatest fear for us is our own potential in understanding what we're really capable of. The scariest thing for us can be really stepping into the person we were really truly born to be. And if we can find a place where that potential is really welcomed, where that potential and those strengths are really leveraged, where we feel fully confident in ourselves to make decisions, and importantly, feel fully confident in ourselves to fail sometimes and to learn from that. And to know that we don't have to live our full biggest life tomorrow, but if we're making steps toward that place, it's a good thing. I think that's allows us to lead a bigger, more fully expressed, really meaningful life that serves ourselves and serves the people around us.
Yeah, you said something super important, like learning with your mistakes. I think here, if we add being resilient,
Mm,
is super important. Falling
so
down
right.
and going back, falling down and going back. If you did it wrong, you learn how not to do the things. Let's go back and do it in the right way, isn't it?
Mm. It's really true. Yeah. Yeah. And how do you view falling down? Do you view it as, gosh, I'm not equipped to do this? Or do you view it as, well, that's one more mistake I won't make again?
Yeah,
Those
this is
two,
important. Yeah, well, I won't do it again. I learned how not to do it.
right, right. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. One's empowering and one's very self limiting.
And how do we let go this judgment toward ourselves and we can move forward? Because it's not just feeling judged by others, but the judgment that we do it for ourselves.
Right. This is interesting because I actually just did this work with a client today, and it was really wonderful seeing someone who could be so vulnerable. So many of us deal with self-judgment, and it holds us back from living the life we want. We want to push that self-judgment away and make it not part of us. I think something that may be useful for folks is to, instead of trying pushing it away, understand that self-judgment, that gremlin or saboteur that sits on our shoulders and whispers in our ear, that was put there at some point in our lives to protect us. And it may not be as useful today, but at some point in our lives, it was really beneficial. So instead of trying to push that part of us away, what if we ask that part, can you be an ally for me? Can you point out the dangers and give me a choice of whether I want to pursue this or not? And if we make it an ally as opposed to an enemy, it has a whole different flavor for us. And we can use it to help us move forward as opposed to something that's holding us back.
Yeah, because sometimes we listen things from our parents and they were just saying those things to protect us. So if we can revisit this as an adult and just seeing, like asking again, okay, why I received this advice, why they were trying to protect me, how can I use this and take a decision to move forward? What are the dangers that I'm facing here? What is the danger? Yes.
Right. We get those lessons from early on, and they're deeply imprinted on us sometimes.
Yeah, that's why some people have the imposter syndrome. Why do we suffer from it, and how can we deal with it?
Well, I think what you're referring to, what I think about imposter syndrome, I think of this feeling that, hey, I don't belong here. What if the people around me figure out that I don't belong here? That's a really scary thought. And I think it goes back to this idea of acknowledging it. I'm feeling it. Oh, it's here again, maybe. And then deciding, is that the story that I want to lean into in the next few minutes? Is that what the evidence is telling me about whether I belong? Is that how I want to serve the people around me, from that place of imposter or from a different place, which is more empowering?
Yeah, I totally agree. I have a story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to have an MBA, and in my career, it was important on my resume to grow professionally when I was working as an executive. And I chose the most expensive MBA in Brazil. I wanted to do English because I wanted to learn English. So I
Right.
went there and applied to join the MBA, and the cost of the MBA was 7 times my salary.
Oh my gosh.
It was so expensive, but I knew if I did that course, I could earn 7 times more. So I had to invest. So I went there, applied for a scholarship, and I came back and talked to my husband, hey, I enrolled myself on an MBA and it's going to cost that amount. And he was almost like saying, how can you do that? It's not enough. We cannot afford it. I said, no, I applied for a scholarship. And I told them, I'm going to be a successful executive and they have to believe on me. And they gave me the scholarship. I was able to pay like 1/7 of the cost. So I put all my salary on it for a year and a half and asked my husband to help out. So I need to invest on me. But I wanted to be one of them. I was not ready. I had this imposter syndrome when I was there. I couldn't speak English very well at the time. All people around me were like very well successful executives, but I want to be one of them. So I decided to pretend and be there. And the biggest challenge was that I got pregnant in the middle of the MBA.
Oh my gosh.
It was so hard going with a big belly to the classes. And we had like 40 days in Canada, an immersion of global business. And I went with a big belly, but I was getting the baby and asked my mom to join. I said, Mom, please come with me if the baby decides to get born. But I have to confess, I got the job of my dreams. I was doing interviews when I was 8 months pregnant. And I went to the interviews and all the employers said, why are you doing interview prep? I said, oh, I'm ready. In 1 month, I'll be ready. She will be born. And I got the job that I was making. I was making 7 times more when my daughter was 2 months old. And was because the people I surrounded myself with. Everybody was moving up in their career, and I wanted to be one of them. I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom at that time. And I got my dream and I made it come true. So I think I faced imposter syndrome. At the beginning, it was hard, but I felt like one of them because I really wanted to be one of them.
Right.
And I got it.
Man, what a courageous, inspiring story where you all these voices were telling you, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. There's so many reasons not to do it. And yet you chose to listen to a different story.
Yeah. And I learned English. Here I am. I moved to the United States. It was very helpful. It was good to have an MBA. Now I'm helping entrepreneurs, and having this knowledge is amazing. And let me tell you something. 2 years later, my husband enrolled himself in the same MBA. And he's really thriving his career. But I'm proud to say that I was brave. I was brave to do it. And I had his support all the time. And being courageous, it's not easy. But I think facing the challenges is the most important thing. Even if you feel afraid, but just trying to manage those feelings is the secret.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely.
Can you share some stories, some successful stories of confidence, Gab, from your clients too?
Sure. Yeah. I'll tell you a story of a woman I was working with. She was a senior executive with a very large technology company, had everything going well for her. She had a big team. She had a big influence on the success of the organization, and the organization brought in some new leadership. And as often happens, this new leadership brought in their own team. And the first step was that her voice wasn't listened to as often. The second step was she wasn't invited to the meetings that she used to be invited to. Third step was she stopped having the same level of confidence and influence that she had always had. And eventually she ended up leaving this organization. And it was really sad for her because she loved this place. She loved the people she was working with. She loved the work she was doing. It was really sad for her, and it had a big impact on her confidence. And we worked for a while on this and what she was telling herself around this, and comparing that to the evidence that she had, and comparing that to the network she had built and what other people thought of her genuinely. And from that place, we started talking about what her strengths were and what kind of role would really light her up, what would enliven her. And she formed a pretty good picture of a new role, which would really be quite different than the one she had and would be on a higher scale. Started interviewing. And before long, a global organization, she was based in the US, and an organization from Sweden contacted her and said, we need someone who has these skills and talents to work on a global basis. And we worked on some of the interview stuff. We worked on some of the questions she needed to be asking to make sure it was really her role to take on. And after about 6 weeks of interviewing, she took on that role, reporting directly to the CEO, traveling the world in support of a global team. And I just heard from her. I was so grateful. I heard from her last week in text, and she said, I'm having a blast and I'm doing such great stuff. And I am so glad that I left the old organization. So just really an inspiring story of when people really step into who they really are and kind of ignore those voices that are holding them back, that gosh, so much is possible. it's just so inspiring for me.
Yeah, and it's different when you have a coach helping you out, see different perspectives of what's going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps. So for us that we are coaches, we have to have our own coaches.
Right. Absolutely. I have 2 coaches.
And what type of client do you love working with, Andy?
I love working with people who really have big, audacious dreams, who see themselves in service to the world. They are likely successful in many ways, but they may be they're doing well, but they see themselves as change agents in the world, in service to themselves, in service to the people around them, in service to their organization. And they see themselves as listening to outside voices to help them get to where they want to go. That they recognize that they don't have it all quite figured out, and listening to other people and or asking themselves the right questions can really help accelerate their path. So people in technology, people in healthcare, people in nonprofits, people in government, people in finance. But the kind of the through line through all this is people who see themselves as having more to learn.
Yeah, I think being open-minded is the secret to really take the best out of coaching. And how can people get in touch with you? What is the best way? If anyone fell in love with all your skills, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I'd love to hear from anybody, to hear your feedback on this conversation. And I hope you'll put my email address in your liner notes there. Scantland, ASCANTLAND at upsideleadership.co. Scantland at upsideleadership.co. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we can put on the description of the podcast to make it easy for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So let's close up. Give us, our audience, some final recommendations on this topic.
So here's something that I imagine a lot of people who are listening to you, Bettina, have this experience where they're having to make a presentation in a room full of leaders, or they're going on stage for a panel discussion or for a keynote, perhaps. And perhaps they get a little squeamish. They're starting to hear some voices in their head like, maybe I don't belong here. What are these folks going to think? My heart's going to be racing. I'm going to use a lot of filler words. There's going to be a lot of ums and ahs. What if I sweat? What if I'm not wearing what the other people are wearing? And here's a secret, a little trick you can bring to the surface that can really help. As we talked about earlier, all those messages we're getting, I'm going to be sweating, the language is going to be wrong, I don't belong here. All those are around those outside messages coming in. And the key is that all comes into self-judgment. What if you took the perspective of, how can I serve the people in this room right now? What am I curious about? There's something about human dynamics where it's very difficult for us to get into self-judgment when we're serving somebody else. And so if you could just ask yourself the question, how am I serving this group right now? I imagine your heart rate will fall. You'll get more curious. You'll ask some questions, and you'll show up far more powerfully and more fully in your own voice.
I love your advice. I'm going to use this to record my TikTok videos.
Fantastic. Good. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you so much for taking the time, being with us, sharing your amazing knowledge. And I hope we all can practice some of the tips you share here with us today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You've been so generous, Bettina. Thanks so much for your time and sharing me a little bit with your audience. I'm very grateful.
Today, we're going to learn how to develop an unshakable confidence. My friend Andy will share some tips, stories, and strategies to better deal with your confidence. This episode will help you unleash your inner strength and build an unshakable confidence you need to succeed in life. We'll explore the topic of confidence from all angles and share practical insights. Andy is an experienced coach I met in Colorado when I was living in the United States, And I admire him because he's one of the board members of ICF Colorado, is the coaching association. And he spent a couple of decades in senior corporate leadership before transitioning to coaching. So that means he has a lot of experience in the corporate environment. And he's also a professional certified coach, an executive strength coach, an brain-based coach. He has several credentials. He specialized in working with organizational leaders, helping them be more authentic and inspired in their leadership role. Whenever you're struggling with self-doubt, fear of failure, or simply want to boost your self-esteem, this episode is for you. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take your self-confidence to the next level. Thanks, Andy, so much for taking the time and sharing your knowledge here with us today. Thank you for listening to Wisdom Woman Podcast. To hear past and future episodes, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast channel. We appreciate your reviews. To give us suggestions for future show topics, please write to us at podcast@witty.tech. If you're interested in having me as your trusted advisor, schedule a strategic coaching session on my website, www.witty.tech.